Hello, everybody. Hello. This is the Heat Index. I am Timothy Cyphers, and I can't thank you enough for joining me once again. First 3 episodes are up. Apple Podcasts, theheatindex.buzzsprout.com, or for the visually impaired listeners who use the new generation Victor Stream, you can find it on there under the podcast option as well. So Apple Podcasts, theheatindex.buzzsprout.com, and on your Victor Stream. Again, I'm Timothy Cyphers. We have a heck of a guest tonight. An awesome interview. It's going to answer a lot of people's questions. It gave me the opportunity to get to know this individual, and I'm super excited. It's one of my new teammates and your newly elected president of the National Beep Baseball Association. And of course, I'm talking about Mr. Blake Boudreaux. Now, Blake and I have gotten to know each other through social media and a couple of instances at last year's World Series. But like I said, I get to know him on a more personal level because of this interview. And we get to cover a lot of things NBBA related. So I really hope that this is listened to, feedback is given. He really lends clarity to his thoughts and his vision of where the NBBA is heading and where he wants it to head. We discussed Paralympic consideration, the international aspect to our sport, the code of ethics, his story, his background. You know, the Bayou City Heat tied into this because it is in fact the Heat Index. He is in fact a Bayou City Heat member. So this is going to be a heck of a listen. It's going to be a 2-part episode. So this is going to be part 1. And I just want to know right now.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
I am sure ready. I think you are too. So without further ado, I'm not going to waste too much more of your time. We're going to get into this great listen. Thank you so much for checking it out. Happy holidays. This is the Heat Index, and it starts now. What's up, everybody? This is Tim Cyphers, and this is the Heat Index. Joining me tonight is a really special guest. I'm excited to do this. His name is Mr. Blake Boudreaux. What is up, Blake?
How's it going, Tim?
Not bad, man. It's not like we don't have a lot to talk about, huh?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting night. Hopefully we get a lot of listeners and we're able to answer people's questions. So
yeah, dude, I think we're gonna. And I want to have fun. I want to get to know you. And, selfishly, that's what this has been about for me. But tonight we got some stuff to talk about. It's funny that we're going to be talking about politics and not like real life politics, but like beat baseball politics. We'll have fun. And that's what the main thing about this is. I'm gonna cut to the chase right away and start off with one of those hard-hitting questions. What the heck is the story with the Facebook groups? Like, what is up with Beat Ball Nation?
Oh, you're going to start right off with that one, Tim. All right.
Hard hitting.
Yeah, that's good. Several Facebook groups were started a couple years ago. Due to us as an organization, as our league tried to clean up the image of our social media pages. So we had individuals going back and forth and not necessarily doing anything wrong, but just from an outsider's perspective, it wouldn't have been good to see all the bickering and trash talk and everything else on an NBBA official page.
Right.
So what happened was we had a couple outlying groups start different pages. The first was Beat Ball Nation, and then just Beat Ball followed, and then there was a couple of other ones that spurred from both of those groups. In the beginning, those groups were fantastic. I mean, the debates we were able to have outside of the public eye, just between the membership of our organization and people who are interested in the sport, were fantastic. Like I said, we had, discussions regarding beat baseball and, who's the best hitters people have ever seen, what did we like and dislike about the World Series, all the stuff that people want to talk about that can get kind of heated, but like I said, it wasn't in the public eye, so people were allowed to speak freely.
Sure.
It was very enjoyable for a long period of time up until well, and this is my perspective, up until this past year during the election for president and the board of directors. My opponent ended up joining the group, pretty late in the game, and the group I'm speaking of is Beat Ball Nation. And it all of a sudden became a lot more hostile, a lot more heated, and
Contentious.
there was a lot of negativity that spurred from it. And the election was, I don't know if that's a question somebody asked, but the election was very negative in a lot of ways on that page. So it was something I didn't enjoy. It was something that a lot of people didn't enjoy watching. Many people left the group at that time. I left later on because, running for president, I felt I needed to hear everything that was being said. I wanted to get, the perspective so that when I did take over in this position, I could basically serve our organization in the best way possible. But, for me personally, it was something I didn't want to be a part of after the fact. It brought a lot of stress to my life and a lot of dramatics that, I haven't dealt with since high school. So it wasn't something I wanted to do. I feel it's a great opportunity and a great outlet, but I think it just needs to be cleaned up,
Yeah, if I may,
a lot more positive conversation needs to take place.
for sure, man. And listen, I'm no angel, but I will say that what this sport and particularly this league, in my eyes, and in fact, I left the team over like not thinking this is what it was anymore, and that has a lot to do with where I was personally. But nevertheless, I want this sport, or I thought this sport was bigger than the individual, meaning that we were a community of visually impaired athletes but under that being just human beings. And I will say that last year's election, as much as I tried to avoid the noise, it got contentious. That's like the best word I can think of. I mean, there were personal attacks. I didn't really know either of you other than from Facebook, and I started to think like this is not what we intended. I don't think, but I imagine that was super stressful.
Right, it was, and it caused a lot of distress to not only friends of mine but family members who were in that group. And it was something, Tim, where if you go back and look, and I don't know what's been deleted, what's still on there. I'm not a part of the group anymore. If you go back and look at the trash talk or bashing that came from me, there was zero. And I made it a point not to do that because I wanted to stay above it. I'm not saying the folks who were supporting me or had the same views as I did didn't say anything. I am my own person. They are their own person. I don't control them. But I do know from my opponent and several of his supporters, there's a lot of negativity. I got accused of a lot of things that were not factual. There was a statement made that I was a racist and, pretty inflammatory accusations that are absolutely untrue. And it was not something I wanted to be a part of. It was not something I wanted my family to be a part of, or, anybody to see for that matter. So.
Holy crap. Well, let's clear the air right now on that one. Are you a racist?
Absolutely not. The actual quote was, well, I'll tell you where it stemmed from, just so people understand where this came from. I put together a large group of committees. My predecessor, I respect him. He's a very bright individual, Dan Green.
Yes, sir.
He brought a lot of good to our sport, but in terms of our committees, especially towards the end of his term, they were pretty thin. We had maybe 2 to 3 individuals on each committee. The committees weren't really, well set up, and there was hardly any representation outside of the board itself on those committees.
Sure.
So I wanted to set up, new committees that focused on particular issues and include the general membership in those committees. So that was my point, to include a lot of bright individuals who could help our sport grow. I had people in mind. I asked people to let me know if they wanted to join the committees. Late in the game, there was an individual from the Chicago Comets who wanted to join one of my committees, and it happened to be one of the most popular committees out there. It was Outreach, and it was full. We had everybody we needed. It was broke up into geographical areas, so people focused on different parts of the country and internationally, and we already had people in place. So my response to that individual and several others was, I will put you down on the list. When something comes available, I will let you know, and you'll have an opportunity. Well, what stemmed from that was a comment made by my opponent that Blake must have ran out of his quota for black people. No, that was an exact quote, and that was something that a lot of people saw. It offended me, and it offended a lot of people around this league. So
that is
Larry Reed from Tyler, who is the coach of Tyler and a longtime member of the NBBA, was disgusted by that comment and defended me immediately after that was said, and several others did as well.
So when I asked that, I knew the answer.
Absolutely,
yep. You know what I mean. But why not? You know what I mean. And that's whether that was said in jest or not, I don't know. But it's just something that doesn't need to be said.
Correct.
Especially if it was said in jest, because it's just not funny.
It's not funny, and a lot of the things that are said, I don't know, like you said, if they're meant to be humorous or not. It's hard to tell in a lot of cases. But it's something that if somebody got a hold of, say my employer got a hold of, somebody saying that about me, or, a sponsor got a hold of a lot of things that were going on in that group, I'm telling you, it would be very detrimental to not only myself, but our organization as a whole.
So that's going to bring me to we perhaps we get back to some stuff like this, but I want to get to, like you brought up sponsorship, and this is a big leap for me, but like I think a lot of us have this dream or this vision of becoming a Paralympic sport. Right?
Right.
That's safe to say?
That is correct, yes. That's my dream.
And I think that's so badass, because I just can't believe I'm a part of something like that. I mean, I got to play last season with a Paralympic athlete. To me, that was such an honor. You know what I mean? But that's a long way of saying, like, I don't think the Paralympics, from my little knowledge of it, would approve of a lot of the crap that I see. And again, I want to be accountable. Like, I have not conducted myself at all times as a great it was behind the scenes. So I try my best, and I can only speak for me, of being a good ambassador for this sport because of what it's done for me. And if we have lofty goals like that, can we ever maintain that vision if we're gonna be so what's the word? Just vicious towards one another.
Right, and I will answer several of the questions that were asked within this comment. You take accountability for your actions, and as do I. I grew up in this sport. I grew up from a child to a man in the sport of beat baseball. I did not always conduct myself in a mature manner, in a manner befitting of my current position. I'm a very competitive individual. I have lost my cool out on the field, as a lot of us have.
Sure.
However, when it comes to off the field antics or activities, I've never done anything to shed a poor light on our organization. I've never done anything to, at the host hotel or at different NBBA events. It's always been on the field, just during the heat of competition.
Sure.
So I take full accountability for that. And getting back to your statement regarding the Paralympics and where we want to take this sport and what it's going to take to do that, that's essentially where, the focus was when I was trying to create a way to basically clean up this organization. And it's something that different individuals have tried to do over the years. I know a former president of the NBBA, Ed Doc Bradley, was one of the first to try to implement a disciplinary code and to really follow through with different measures in order to clean up our sport and clean up the image. No, the answer to your question is, will the Paralympic Committee approve of some of the things that are going on? And absolutely not. And in one of my campaign videos, I laid out a plan of what I was going to do, and one of the main topics was I was going to create an ethics committee to create a code of ethics that would assist us in getting where we need to be in terms of our image, and basically to clean up what needs to be cleaned up. And I've done that, and we have worked tirelessly to create a code of ethics that's not only fair, but applies to our organization as a whole. We took a lot of the ideas and information for our code of ethics from the International Paralympic Committee, because that's my goal. That's the goal of a lot of our athletes, is to take this sport to a new level. So therefore, we took a lot of insight and a lot of information from their code of conduct. We also took some information and some ideas from a lot of different amateur sports, USABA, a lot of intercollegiate sports, and professional sports. We took a lot of different paths to form this code of ethics. It touches on things like behavior on social media, and that's been a hot topic. People don't want to be policed on social media. But what they have to understand is, when you're involved in an organization, whether it be collegiate or, at a Paralympic sport or whatever the case may be, you can't just go on social media and say whatever you want, because it reflects poorly on the organization you belong to. And that applies to work, that applies to, anything you're doing in life. There's certain boundaries you cannot cross when you belong to certain organizations, and that's kind of where we are with the social media. The, substance abuse is one thing. We need to clean that up. Drug use and alcohol abuse in our sport has been an issue over the years. And it's something that sponsorships, the Paralympic Committee in the future, and, general public and media or whoever it may be, do not want to see. And if they do see it, it's going to shed a poor light on our sport and set us back years. So
Agreed.
That's kind of where we went with the code of ethics.
So I'm gonna do the biggest big market tease of my young career so far, and by career I mean podcasting. I'm going to get back to the code of ethics, because there's a lot of questions people have, specifics as far as specifics go, and you covered some of them. Don't get me wrong. Even your host Timmy here has some questions. I don't know about concerns, but questions, and we'll talk about that. But I want to switch focus for now. You brought up growing up in this league and in this sport. Blake, how I hate to do this to you, but I feel like I can. How old are you?
I'm about to turn 34 in March.
Oh, okay. So you're still a young guy. You're a young buck. So take me through, because you mentioned being a kid. When were you introduced to beat baseball? How were you introduced to beat baseball?
It was actually through school. I had a teacher's aide who worked with me on Braille. Her job was essentially to make accommodations for my classes at school. So she, created my exams or homework in Braille or whatever I needed. And her adopted son, who was, I believe he was 17, 18, 19 at the time, he actually was involved in beat baseball, and she would bring pictures to school, and she brought a beat baseball to school kind of to show me what the sport was all about. And she asked me if I wanted to come out and observe the sport. And at the time, and still for the most part today, there wasn't a lot of kids in our sport. It's mostly adults. We do have some great youth athletes, but it's mostly adults. And she just wanted me to come out and basically see what it was all about. And I was 9 years old at the time, so I really didn't have any aspirations to play. But, I went out and I was a big sports buff and wanted to check out what beat baseball was. So I went out and basically at that first practice fell in love with it, and at 9 years old, I started my beat baseball career.
Like competitively?
I had my first at bat. I didn't attend the 1994 World Series in Florida. My first World Series, my first tournament was the Fort Worth tournament in 1995, leading up to the World Series.
Okay.
And my first at bat in a World Series game took place in Denver, Colorado in 1995 at age 10. So I just turned 10.
Dude, that is holy crap, dude. That's amazing. So what did you fall in love with? Like, do you remember it vividly? Like, for me, I remember I was told about it at an independent living program shortly after vision loss. I thought it was just this thing to get me, happy and active
Right.
and off my butt and all, whatever. And then I go out and try it out with a couple of the Renegades and Coach Weissman, and I put on the blindfold, which was awkward, but I swing, and that's what I fell in love with, the crack of the bat for the first time in years. And do you remember what you fell in love with?
The thing was, my dad was a coach for 40 years in middle school and high school. So he was a basketball coach, football coach, tennis coach. He did it all. He helped coach my brother's baseball team, my sister's softball team at one point. So we were a sports family. And, I had never really gotten to participate at that time. I played t-ball and I played soccer, but it was not at a high level because my vision didn't allow me to do so. So the thing I loved about it, and it kind of was in complete opposition to what I thought it was going to be, is essentially like you said. I thought it was going to be something, go out, clap hands, sing Kumbaya, everybody gets a snow cone and,
Right.
A blue ribbon. And it was the complete opposite of that. I wanted to compete. I was a competitor even at that age. And just to see these adults, blind and visually impaired adults, which I hadn't been around a lot of folks with the same situation that I was dealing with. So to see them flying around the field and, running and tackling the base full force, and it blew my mind. It was literally just that first practice absolutely blew my mind, and I knew competitively this was something that I needed in my life. So,
It's funny. I guess I had similar feelings at first. However, when I nearly didn't have it because of some stuff that was going on in my life and my departure from my former team, I realized just how important it was to me. So that's sort of after the fact, but it really is, for me, it's liberating. You know what I mean? Like it's any opportunity I get to tell someone about beat baseball. It just tugs on my heartstrings, man, because it's just that important to me. So like I said, I mean, I'm getting choked up just saying this because I almost threw it away or at least temporarily. And I don't ever want to do that again. So thanks to you guys.
Well, and just to speak to the nature of beat baseball and, my love for the game, I did have a rare opportunity for someone who's blind or visually impaired, and I did play at a major high level, 5A high school in the state of Texas in football. And if anybody knows anything about Texas high school football, it's no joke.
Right.
And my size definitely helped me with that. My junior and senior year, I was 6'4", 315 pounds. So I was a big boy. So, I did have that opportunity to let out some of, my competitive juices in football. But I will tell people until I'm blue in the face, as hard hitting and as competitive as that was for me, playing a sport that I loved and never thought I'd be able to play in football, beat baseball is not only more complex, it's not only more competitive, but it's tougher on the body than football ever thought about being. So as you know, with our sport, you're diving on the ground almost every play, you're tackling bases. I feel like sometimes after a World Series, I'm 50 years old, even in my 30s. So it's definitely something that really is something special. It's more competitive than I could ever imagine it being.
No doubt about that. I mean, So I don't want to get anything confused about what I was saying earlier, like where, I posed it as like what I thought this was,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. No, like it is all of those things. Like,
Right.
I think people lose sight of that, and that's a little heavy handed, but you know what I mean? Like people lose sight of what we're doing here at times. But I do want to stress and do stress in my everyday life that this is something bigger than me, and that's, I get a sense of brotherhood and family and camaraderie, and it's such an honor to go to war, between the lines, but then off the field, season round,
Well, and
having a
Tim, one of the big things about our sport is it's not just a game. It's not just about what happens on the field. It really is life changing for a lot of our athletes and our volunteers. And I could go on for hours about how it's changed different people's lives throughout the years that I've been playing. But perfect example is Fonzie Madrano, the pitcher of the Bayou City Heat.
Hmm.
Fonzie will admit to the fact that as a youth, as a young man, he got himself in a lot of trouble. He got himself involved in the wrong crowd, and just was not headed in the right direction in life. Um, Fonzie's cousin ended up getting shot, and losing his vision, and then being introduced to the sport of beat baseball, which essentially drugged Fonzie into the sport as a volunteer and pitcher.
right.
And watching him grow up from an 18-year-old kid who, like I said, was headed in the wrong direction in life to someone who's not only graduated with his bachelor's and his master's, but I believe at this point has finished his doctorate and has a successful career and a family with beautiful children and a wife and doing things the right way. And I don't know if Fonzie will admit to this, but I know he's talked about it before. Beat baseball was an essential part of him turning his life around.
So
So there's stories like that throughout our sport, and it's something that breeds confidence in our athletes, but also gives our sighted volunteers a different perspective of what life is actually all about.
you know I'm getting goosebumps listening to that, because I got to room with Fonzie, right? And uh he did, at least in a moment of candor, and I won't out at much of the conversation, but he did say as much, that it impacted his life deeply. And I look at someone like him. He's a sighted volunteer, um, and he's just as invested in this, if not more so than some of us. But I mean, it's just so important to him, and I'd love to get the newly elected president's words. You just said some about a specific, but on our volunteers, man. Like I know that we could not do this without them.
No, and it's one of those things where we have been very lucky as an organization to have some of our sighted volunteers stick with us for years and years and years. And it's not just, it's everything from our scorekeepers to our umpires. We've had umpires who've been, involved in our sport for 20 or 30 years. Some individuals on our board, Jan Traphagen, Dan Green, our former president, and just the list goes on and on and on. Our treasurer, John Lykowski's, been in various roles, involved with teams and then involved with the board as an umpire, doing a million different things. And this sport wouldn't be able to exist without those individuals and their contribution. We rely on our sighted pitchers, our sighted catchers, our spotters, like I said, scorekeepers and umpires, and everybody in between. And it's amazing to see a lot of those folks grow up. Someone like Jared Woodard, the pitcher for the Indy Thunder, seeing him, as a child. I remember when Jared was essentially in diapers, walking around the beat ball field, and then seeing him turn into a pitcher at age, I believe he was 13 or 14 years old, and then now being a two-time defending champion, leading his team, to the pinnacle of our sport. It's just amazing to watch. But we wouldn't be able to do it without those individuals, and they're essential to our game.
Hey, for that two-time part kind of stung a little bit because I was on the losing side of one of those.
As was I.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, fair enough. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah. Listen, but in all seriousness, they are, that program and many others. The sighted volunteers are really, for me, like the driving force as to how this is trending and how as many concerns as you and I and others have. I don't want to downplay just how proud I am of our sport and our league. So thank God for our sighted volunteers, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. And that's what keeps us going, man. Ready for another hard hitter?
Absolutely. I just want to say one thing prior to, with all the controversy and all the negativity that's been out there and, the heated issues and whatever the case may be, that is not to say that we don't have one of the greatest sports on the planet. We do. We have one of the greatest sports organizations on the planet. And we are spanning throughout the globe now. Teams from the Dominican Republic, Taiwan, Japan has recently learned how to play. Venezuela is requesting equipment. Argentina. So we are spanning the globe. And like I said, not to say we don't have one of the greatest sports in this world. I want to see it get to the next level, and that's what I'm trying to do as president of the NBBA.
Spoken like a true ambassador, man. So, all right. Speaking
Let me
of
have it. Now you can give me that question.
All right. Speaking of negativity, I was asked earlier today when I posted, like, "Hey, you got any questions?" I'm gonna ask it. Screw it, because I know you're gonna be open to it. Was your departure from the Jets anything to do with your opposition's affiliation with that program?
Yeah, and I'll absolutely answer that question. It was funny to me. I laughed for quite a long time when somebody mentioned that I would be afraid to answer the tough questions. They obviously have not been around me long enough. So, for those of you who don't know, my opposition for president of the NBBA did play on the team I competed with this year, the San Antonio Jets. This individual and I have never really had harsh words prior to this election. I'm not going to say he was someone I looked up to or, had any feelings whatsoever about. However, his actions during the election, his comments, the inflammatory remarks, false accusations, whatever the case may be, really put a big damper on my excitement and my passion for, just the sport in general. It was something to where, I look forward to the World Series every single year. And this individual and his antics and remarks really caused a lot of problems with me personally and with the team I was with. I did my best to stay above it. I didn't confront this individual, and I went to compete, and this was my first year with San Antonio, and it was my first year away from the Bayou City Heat, which was a team I had been with for 23 years leading up to this year. So I did my best to stay above it, and the San Antonio Jets are one of the best organizations in this sport. They're fairly new, just a few years old. Kevin Simpson, Marty and Eddie, who are, catcher, spotter, coaches, they run a tight ship and they run a great organization, and every single member of that team is a competitor and a good person. I enjoyed myself. We didn't have any sort of confrontation at the World Series between myself and my opposition as president, but I really did not want to be on a team with somebody who had that much negativity towards me, who wasn't supportive as a teammate, who did everything they possibly could to, cause problems and stir the pot. That being said, although I did inquire whether or not he was going to be a member of the San Antonio Jets, I had made my decision prior to his answer to that question. Would that have affected whether or not I stayed with the team? I can't speak to that. I don't know because I didn't have time to think on it because I had already made my decision. So members of the Bayou City Heat approached me at a fundraiser we were doing, and essentially we, like grown adults, we had a conversation. We cleared the air. There was apologies made, and I decided to come back home. 23 years with the same team, the Houston Bayou City Heat is home, and as much as I enjoyed being a part of the Jets, which you better believe I enjoyed that. That was one of the funnest years I've had in a very long time. Those guys, there's some incredible athletes on that team, and I'm telling you, you better look out for those boys for the next 10 years. So As much as I enjoyed it, I had to come home. Would my decision have been affected if I hadn't have made it prior to, my opponent's decision to stick with him? I can't speak to that. But did I want a teammate who bashed me or disrespected me the way he did? Absolutely not, because that would not happen on my current team. So
I appreciate the candor, and I can speak to that not happening in our program. But I also can speak to the difficulty of leaving a team, and I never thought I would. And I had the luxury of not being in a program for as long as you were. How trying of a transition was that from, as brief as it may have been and as much fun as you had, I'm imagining that was tough.
Well, and this is another question I can answer for you while I'm, essentially responding to the question you just asked me. The reason I left Houston was, misunderstanding, some hostility, some basically disagreements that came up between myself and our coach, Jerlaine Carter. And I've known Jerlaine since he was a young kid. I believe he started volunteering for us when he was 12 or 13 years old. So I've seen him grow up as well.
Yeah.
And he's a very competitive guy. He's a very strong-willed guy. I'm a very competitive guy. I'm a very strong-willed guy. And we did get into it. We did argue. There was nothing ever physical, of course, but it was, arguments and disagreements, whatever the case may be. And there was some issues that, other people, regardless of what the reasoning behind it was on the team, had issue with some of the actions that I had taken or some of the things I had said or whatever the case may be.
Sure.
There was basically, several people within the Bayou City Heat organization who weren't sure whether or not this was a good fit anymore. Okay, just to be completely honest. So there was discussion about a vote being taken whether or not I would remain on the team. And after being with that team for 23 years, I didn't feel it was necessary or something that should be done to take a vote. I wanted a discussion to be had. I asked my team at the time to contact me with any problems that they had with me, issues that they had. We could discuss it. And that just didn't happen. There was a few people who contacted me, whatever the case may be, but it became a very heated issue, and I decided to step away. And it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. When Kevin Simpson, the pitcher and founder of the San Antonio Jets, started the team, I was one of the first people he called. He had always wanted to compete with me on the same team, and I had always, of course, wanted to compete with, in my opinion, the best pitcher in the history of the NBBA. So that was a year prior, and so I thought to myself, well, why don't I go give this a try? Why don't I step away from whatever is going on in Houston and go and have this experience and see what comes out of it, knowing the entire time how hard it was going to be. And I'm telling you, Tim, that what hit home to me, and I got choked up when I was standing on a field and Mansfield outside of Dallas, Texas, at a tournament, and hearing that Bayou City Heat cheer on the other field, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right at all. Granted, the one thing on my mind during that tournament was to put on a show and compete as hard as I possibly could to beat Houston, because I'm just a competitor. But it did not feel right. It hurt. It hurt. And, it was a really good feeling to where we could clear the air this year and I could come back home. So
I love that you keep saying home. It's funny because I don't know a lot about that, and I don't need to. What I want to know is what you just told me, and that's like, it feels like it's water under the bridge. But I've played one tournament with the Heat, and I already feel, a culture that I'm just so happy to be a part of. Am I thrilled about how things went down last year with me? No. With me and my former team? No, of course not. However, I do think things sometimes just work out, as cheesy as this might sound, things work out the way they're supposed to. Things happen for a reason. And I'm home now too. And that's
and that's life. I'm
right.
My religious views, and it may be in opposition to a lot of folks, but I am Christian, and I do believe God does everything for a reason. And it's kind of like one of those things, Tim, and people can relate to this. Family members getting spats. Sometimes it's just best to take a step back and realize what you have. And until you take that step back or pull yourself away from that situation, you don't realize what's important. You don't realize how lucky you are or how blessed you are to have what you have in your life. And those guys are family. Houston is family. Daryl Miner, I've known Daryl since he was a teenager, and now he's a 40-year-old man. It's those guys I grew up with. They taught me how to be a man. They taught me how to be a successful and independent blind or visually impaired individual. So, those guys are family. It is home, and, it's something that I wanted to be a part of again, and everybody was for it. So,
Blake, can I take a moment for something kind of
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Based on what you just said, it kind of hit home, which is just that family members have spats and that you got to take a step back sometimes. And now that I've had a lot of time and clear-headedness to think about this, I didn't think it would come up like this, but it's coming up organically, and that's kind of how I like things now. I want to say that from the bottom of my heart, what I was introduced to by my former team, and let's speak their name out of respect, is the Boston Renegades. What they introduced me to was a sport and a community that I truly, from the bottom of my heart, am so blessed to be a part of. And for that, I'm forever grateful. And to just focus on me and what I did wrong, I'm sorry. And I just think that I was becoming or acting a way that I did not like. It was unbecoming of a young man, and that was ultimately where I needed to step away. I made some noise on the way out. I just hope that they can recognize I didn't do it publicly, or at least I tried my best to not do it publicly, because they don't deserve that. They're a class act organization, and I'm just so glad to be away from those goofy cheers. No, I'm joking, guys, but no. Let's get. Blake, I appreciate you giving me that moment, because what you said was deeply impactful to me, and it came up organically. And I have not said that publicly yet, so that it is what it is. I am home now. I'm part of something that's really, really special. These guys, I mean, and this includes you, because you're part of that Texas that whole like culture down there with the beat baseball teams, because there's a bunch of them.
Right.
I didn't have direction, man. I felt screwed. I felt like meaning like I didn't know what I was going to do. And you guys,
right.
and the Heat players and volunteers, particularly from last season, to just give me a shot, not really knowing much about me. I did my best to like promote these garbage time stats I had, but That wasn't this is what really drew me in, is like not knowing much about me and having Tanner and Jerlaine reach out to me and say, yeah, man, like, we'll give you a shot, just behave. And it's like,
Right.
oh man,
Right.
I was at a time where I needed that culture, and I got it. And man, it's infectious, and I'm gonna do my best to be a positive impact both on and off of the field. And
that's the thing. We all make mistakes. I mentioned earlier, and I'll stand by this. I am so far from perfect, it's not even funny. But you have to learn from those mistakes, figure out how it impacted your life, and what you just did, and apologizing to your former team. And I did the same thing with Houston upon my return. It's just something that, as a man, or as something as an adult, as you grow, you learn to do. And taking something from that and admitting where you're wrong, it just shows your maturity at this point. So,
thanks, Blake. Can you tell me about your vision? Like, was it vision loss, or because you said you were like 9 years old and you were learning Braille, so it must have been from an early age. But what is that like? Because I feel like you have some functional vision like me. Can you just touch on that? Explain it. I don't know.
Right. Well, I was diagnosed at 14 months. My dad was playing with me in the living room and noticed something looked kind of odd in my eye. That was my left eye at the time. And so they took me to the doctor, not thinking it was anything serious. And a few hours later, they said, your son has cancer in his eye. And that was on, I believe, a Thursday, and they removed my left eye on the following Monday.
Oh, no kidding.
That's how aggressive the cancer was. And that's what happened. Initially, they thought the cancer was gone. Retinoblastoma is the name of it. They thought the cancer was gone, and then by the time around my third birthday, it had spread to my right eye, and they found 25 tumors in my right eye.
Holy moly!
Which was at the time was the most tumors they had ever seen in an infant's eye or a child's eye. So it was pretty traumatic, and it took a team of doctors to really figure out what they wanted to do. And there was some debate whether or not they wanted to try to treat the cancer with radiation or remove the eye. And I thank God, I thank my doctor, everybody involved for making the decision to try to fight. They could have removed the eye immediately and I would have been fine. But they wanted to try to fight this cancer and save that eye. And so I was given an extreme dose of radiation, so much so that they had to clear out both sides of my hospital room. So the room on the right, the room on the left were completely cleared out. Hospital personnel was not allowed to enter the room without clearance, and they slid my food and my mother's food through a slot in the door. So that's how much radiation that was given to me as a child. And, they put radiation chips within my eye. Cobalt implants is what they were called. And, basically an aggressive approach to try to fight the tumors. That worked, but what happened was it created a massive cataract that they did not want to remove because they said, you've been operated on way too much, and if we try to remove the cataract, your eye is going to hemorrhage and you're not going to be able to do anything with it anyway. So long story short, by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I was pretty much seeing shadows, some light, some basic figures, but not able to read prints or do any of that. So it progressively got worse. The cataracts became worse and worse and worse. I learned how to use a cane. I learned how to read Braille. I did everything essentially as a blind person. But, I lived my life. I went to high school. I played football. I learned how to snow ski. I went to college, graduated with honors from college with, 2 degrees, and started my career, bought my first house. I was living a good life as someone who was blind and essentially saw nothing but light. 2009, my doctor referred me to a specialist at Baylor College of Medicine. He said, I just want you to go see this guy. I don't know what's going to come out of it, but just go see him. And this doctor operated on George Bush Sr.'s cataract. So, he's not just some intern or some guy who hasn't had a lot of experience. He's, the best of the best. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm willing to try. And at that time, I don't know what it was, but I was willing to go for it as well. If it went wrong, the eye was going to hemorrhage and I would lose all vision completely forever. And if it went well, I'd be seeing something. So it was kind of a risk, but for me, I was ready to go. And I trusted God. I prayed about it. And what was supposed to be a 30-minute cataract surgery turned into 3.5 hours. Turned into him having to bend his instruments to try to get back to remove the cataract and do some medical techniques that he was never taught and just, did on a whim. I woke up about 4 hours later with a eye patch that had holes in it, and I saw a nurse walk by, and I remember just losing it. I just completely lost it. I jumped up, had a hospital gown on. I was just going crazy. I was just so happy to be able to see that nurse walk by and looked over and saw a group of people, and I didn't know who the heck they were, but it was my parents, my brother, sister, the girl I was dating at the time, and it was just an incredible feeling. So that was 2009. So it's been, a short period of time since I've had, some good functional vision back, but it's been quite the roller coaster.
Holy crap, man. That's
yeah. And I tried to condense that into as short as I could. So that's essentially my story, but it's definitely been a ride.
I don't even know where to begin. It's I'll tell you where I'll begin. Holy crap! I mean, I'm emotional, man. That you packed a lot in. You gave me a lot there in a brief period of time. I mean, that's what's cool about this, man. Because I hear, episode 1, Joseph Fleeks, man. He tells me how in an instant life changed, and
Right.
what he said. Like the biggest thing I heard from that was, I got a lot of life to. I got a lot of life to live. And then,
Exactly.
on another end of the spectrum is you and your story just now, and how life changed, and then it changed again, and that's kind of life, right? Like it's just gonna keep throwing you curveballs, some of them good, some of them bad. I mean, that's holy crap, man.
Well, I will tell everybody until I'm blue in the face that as much as I love being able to see better and have more functional vision, my life was good as someone who could essentially see nothing. I mean, it was really good. So, I was more organized. I actually cooked better as someone who couldn't look at my food. Now I'm like looking at it, that doesn't look right, and I end up burning it or messing it up. But, life was good. And the fact is, one thing that stuck with me through in the entirety of it is regardless of what happened, I was going to be able to go back and play beat baseball. So fact of the matter is there's always going to be that high point in my life, regardless of if this vision stays or goes. I'm always going to have that to fall back on and enjoy. So,
Dude, that's crazy profound, man. Can I ask you, you know a little bit about this, because I don't really hide much either, and I sometimes to a fault, but that's another podcast. Um, so I have loads of functional vision. I'm 22/20 in my better eye, so I actually can't really see much in front of me, except I see
right.
I don't see shadows. I see what you see, and by you I mean sighted listener. It's just blurry and it's not correctable. However, I grew up totally sighted, 20/30 to 2200 in my good eye in 9 weeks. I deal with a lot of like how do I say it? Like there's a lot of complexities as far as the other person that interacts with Tim. Do you ever deal with any of those feelings now that you have some functional vision? Is it confusing to others? Is it how do you deal with that if you have to deal with it at all?
Well, and that's very interesting. And, not to go into too much detail, but I chose my career path based on the fact that I could share my experiences with others. I worked in vocational rehab as a rehab teacher, a counselor, now an employment specialist working with the blind and visually impaired. So I see it daily. I work with individuals who, essentially go from 20/20 vision to blindness within a week or a day or, even a year. And my job is to essentially teach those people how to get back to living life, how to be independent again, and how to, be successful. And with me, personally, like I said, it's a roller coaster. You're going to have those days where you're just frustrated as can be. You couldn't see this, or you couldn't get a ride to go where you need to go. That's the biggest thing as someone who's blind or visually impaired, in my view. And with work, I see it constantly is transportation, just getting from point A to point B.
Mm.
I can't wait until those autonomous cars come out and they're actually feasible for people to use them within the city, because I will be first in line. You'll see me zooming around. I'll be missing about a month of work just zooming around in my new car. So, that's something I deal with it every day. You've mentioned the depression, you've mentioned the anxiety, all of the things in your personal life and what you've battled, and we all battle that. As someone who's blind or visually impaired, it happens. And, I overcome the best I can. I remember what's important in life, and, I'm blessed. I'm blessed to have the career I have. I'm blessed to have the family I have and the loved ones and, the things I'm involved with. And I try to remember what's important, even on those days where it just feels like, insurmountable, odds against me. And, it's really something that takes a lot of strength to get past it, as you know. It takes a lot of strength to get past a disability and to make life worth living, and it's something. Life is always going to have its ups and downs, and it's just all about your perspective and how you treat it.
Yeah, so perspective has been huge for me, and I'm still very, very, so I'm in recovery, but not only from what most people say that for. I do recovery from from vision loss, from self-loathing, from recovery from daily struggles, man. And it's like my perspective has to change, and what I'm doing now, or like, and I mean in this moment, is trying to listen to someone like yourself. You not only deal with it on an individual level, but you see it in your clients and your profession. So I gotta take that and allow this to be profound. Another, and that's the to use that word, allow. If any sighted or vision impaired person can take anything from what I'm about to say, is that, like, allow yourself to hurt, but allow yourself to be resilient as well. You know what I mean? Like fight.
And everything happens for a reason, Tim. And you mentioned this, and we touched on it before. I truly believe that. I believe that if I was a fully sighted individual from day one, I would have been a completely different guy. I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be as driven as I am today. I more than likely would not be alive today with the choices I probably would have chosen. I've always had a fascination with the military. I know for a fact I would have joined the military. Sure. Probably would have entered law enforcement or been a knucklehead or, done some crazy things. And what this, God humbled me, and he made me realize what's important in life through the path that I've lived. And we just have to look for the positive. We have to look for, how we have been blessed by it, and stop focusing on, the struggles we have on a daily basis. You got to let it roll off. You got to enjoy life, look at the positive, and move on.
Oh man, I'm going to do my best. I can't, I know that there are days that I don't even want to get out of bed, man. I don't want to deal with the general public today. I mean, I don't want to deal with Tim today, I'll tell you that that's like, I can't overstate it, is that, like, one of the most instrumental things in getting those days to be farther and fewer between each other is beat baseball. Because I get to do this. I get to interview my teammates, and then I get to talk to them on, like, a daily basis, whether it's on Facebook or on the phone, and I get to hear and witness these stories and these inspirational people and just the sighted volunteers, all that. And as someone who I've battled depression, I've battled vision loss, for God's sakes. Like, that's something that this sport has given me, is the ability to have hope again. And so that is something I just can't overstate, and I'll probably never stop saying. And So thank you for sharing that. Do you have time? Like, are we on a time crunch here?
No, not at all.
Okay, that's fantastic. So I'm going to do something for the first time ever, which is have a 2-part episode. So for the listeners here, you've been duped into having to listen to another episode. And by duped, I mean you get the pleasure to listen to me and, more importantly, Mr. Blake Boudreaux. We got more to talk about. We're going to talk about some of those rule changes, some of those code of ethic changes. We're going to talk more about Blake and my personal stories, and we're going to have a great time. So check out part 2 of the Blake Boudreaux experience. I've been Timothy Sivers. Please check out the next episode, part 2. Bye-bye.